Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Heather Dominick, who is the founder and leader of the Highly Sensitive Entrepreneur Movement. Heather, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I am so looking forward to this conversation.
So I am too, and I really enjoy when I hear names of businesses or programs, because most of the time the name of a business or the name of a program comes from something that, the founder has really just worked on, or it's just a passion of theirs. So, and then when you hear a movement or a cause, that's even more dialed in. So I love Highly Sensitive Entrepreneur Movement. Give us a little bit of your background, and then what brought about this Highly Sensitive Entrepreneur, which is a registered trademark, which is awesome. But let's focus on this and see what was going on to make this come to fruition for you to start this movement.
Yes, I love it. So I have been self-employed for 16 years, and before being self-employed, I was actually a high school drama teacher. So entering into the world of being self-employed was quite a risk and adventure, although I think I was too naive to realize it at the time when I first stepped in. And those first years were, really just a lot of push and struggle and doing whatever was needed to create success in my business. And really, all of that just came from an energy of absolute fear and terror that, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills. And through all of that, hard work, although again, not necessarily coming from the most healthy place, I was able to bring my business across the $1 million mark for the first time about 5 years into my business, and would love to say that it was just this amazing celebratory experience, but it was not. It was a really difficult and what I can look back on and say a dark night of the soul for me. And it's not because of the amount of income that had been generated at that time, but definitely because of the way that I was going about it. Sure. And I really questioned everything that I was doing, because I just thought, gosh, if this is what it takes to create like this quote unquote success, I'm really not sure that I'm up for it. I was really totally overwhelmed, overexhausted, absolutely overworked. And so I withdrew from everything at that time, except for continuing to just really pour my love into the clients that I was serving. And through that dark time, I discovered that I was highly sensitive. And at that time, I had never even heard that phrase. And once I learned what it meant from the founding researcher of the highly sensitive person, whose name is Dr. Elaine Aron, once I understood what it meant, I wasn't so surprised to learn that I was highly sensitive, but I was really surprised to learn how highly sensitive I was. And so that really had me seeing that it was important that I approached everything about being self-employed differently if this was something that I was interested in continuing to do. And as I dove into that, I also brought one of Dr. Aron's assessments to a group of 25 female entrepreneurs that I was coaching at the time, had them take the assessment, and lo and behold, every single woman in that room was also highly sensitive. And that really showed me that absolutely this was something that was not just for me, but was needed for many, because though those women in that room were highly sensitive, not one of them wanted to be. They really saw it as negative. They saw it as a detriment. They saw it as a weakness. And that was back in 2010, and that was really what began what is now the Highly Sensitive Entrepreneur movement and the great body of work that I have developed and continue to develop from immense amounts of research in the areas of psychology, sociology, neuroscience, spirituality, coaching, you name it, to just really continue to develop teachings, trainings, tools to support those who are highly sensitive who desire to be successfully self-employed. And that's the scoop.
That's really cool. And I know that I want to go deeper on a few of those points and talk about a highly sensitive entrepreneur. But one thing that pops into my mind, and maybe you get this a lot from people that hear it for the first time, but what do you say to someone that is on the other end of the spectrum, that they would tick the box that says, I'm the furthest polar opposite of being highly sensitive, but I recognize the fact that I should be more so, and I'm not ever going to, like, for instance, you can never fit a square peg in a round hole, but I do feel like I can round off the corners. Would you say to that entrepreneur, okay, hey, there's some things we can do to kind of, take off the rough edges. You'll never be highly sensitive like in the true definition of, but that would go against your nature anyway. We don't want to force you to be that. But do you feel like there's some elements and attributes that you would be able to teach and coach and mentor someone that would be able to kind of inch them a little further down the line without being full-on highly sensitive entrepreneur?
Yeah, so interesting. So appreciate that question. So, first of all, I think probably it's really valuable to just share with listeners who maybe, like me, when I first heard the phrase, didn't know what it meant. So I'll just briefly say that, according to Dr. Aaron and her research, there are 20% of us in the global population who are born into the world highly sensitive. Sure. So it's literally how you are biologically coded, and it has to do with your nervous system. And the basic explanation is that your nervous system, as a person who's highly sensitive, is wired to take in stimulation at a much higher degree than someone who is not highly sensitive. And that stimulation can be anything from, sight, sound, smells, touch, feelings, energy, information, you name it. And something that, would not really be very stimulating at all to someone who's not highly sensitive could be something that would, absolutely completely flood the nervous system of someone who is. So it's that explanation first. So I always like to say, your parents didn't do it to you, and, you didn't pick it up on the playground, and it's not because of that weird drink you had in college. It's literally because this is how you are coded. So for someone who's not right. So for someone who's not highly sensitive, it's literally something that you can't become. And however, it can be really, really valuable to understand someone who is highly sensitive. So if you are an entrepreneur or just in the workplace or even in your family, most likely you know someone within your experience who is highly sensitive. So it can be just very valuable to understand that someone within your midst is processing the world differently than you are. That being said, going to the other part of your question, so for sure, absolutely, everything that I've created and developed for highly sensitive entrepreneurs could absolutely be of value to someone who is not highly sensitive. And it would just require a real sense of willingness and empathy for someone who's not highly sensitive to really be able to take on the teachings and the tools and to be willing to look through that lens of like, oh, this doesn't necessarily fully apply to me, but I can adapt it, or I could see how, if I'm willing to, look at my limiting beliefs from this perspective, for example, that would be really valuable to me. Because
I feel like if someone would say that they would not classify themselves as highly sensitive. And they saw like, well, hey, here's the attributes of a highly sensitive person / entrepreneur. Here's a bullet list of, 8 attributes. If someone looked at that, they could go, okay, well, that's interesting. Now being more aware of these things. Okay, well, I could be a little bit better listener. Maybe I'm not going to do a, 45-minute deep dive and cup of tea kind of a thing, but maybe I'm going to listen a little bit deeper and ask a couple more questions, which is better than what I used to be. So I think that's a really good observation there. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. Yep.
So now here's a question. Let's say, back when you kind of had that switch turned on for you and started your journey to learning, what did you find were some of the challenges? Because it was halfway now at that point in your life, I don't even know what the heck this means, but here's a challenge. And I think that your challenges then would be different than someone now in the sense that you would be guiding someone through the process that you work with in mentoring. And the challenges might be little C challenges because it's like, oh, here's a little road bump, speed bump, but it's no big deal because this is how I overcame it. But speak a little bit about the challenges that people would face once they start down that journey.
Yeah, totally. For myself, it was really, finding my way in the dark. And I had to do a lot of adapting. That's what I really developed in terms of a skill. So, for example, maybe I would attend a conference, on selling, and it was being taught in a very, I like to say 80%er way, very much a non-highly sensitive way. And then I would take that information and work to put it through my highly sensitive filter and see like, okay, well, what can I take from this that's really valuable, but adjust it and adapt it so that it will work more for my nature so that it can really, do what it's meant to do, to support that process, that journey of being self-employed. And that was and continues to be a really, really valuable process. And I would say, I kind of credit that to one, I come from a psychology and education background. So in many ways, I had been already trained to work with information in that way. And then probably also just a natural fit to my personal strengths. Yeah. And so then from there, now I have that experience as well as years now of continuing this process and continuing to, teach, train, and mentor other HSEs. So now I can very easily, work with a group of highly sensitive entrepreneurs or one-on-one, depending on however they're participating in the Business Miracles mentoring programs, and help them connect the dots to help them see, so this is how you're currently processing. And then this is the end result that you want to be experiencing in your business. So now we have to back it up and we have to break it down into these doable steps that will help you get from where you currently are and what needs to change so that you can actually be experiencing the results that you want to have. And it really, truly is that process. And I really, really emphasize that in my work. And again, in all the mentoring programs that I offer, is that it's not information in, result out. It just doesn't work that way. There really does need to be a breakdown, and there needs to be a willingness to go into process and be in process for oneself.
Yeah. And I think this is such a unique classification, if you want to call it, but so new. But it's not like someone has heard this before and goes, oh, I know what that is. That I think it makes them attuned to be curious to find out what it is, if they would qualify or if they would be classified this way. And I know you've got some assessments that way. But I think let's kind of even talk to that. What would happen if someone is hearing us at this point going, I wonder if I am? How do you know?
Yeah, how do you know? Well, first of all, I would say you probably have had the experience, whether you're conscious of it or not, but you've had the experience of feeling like you are different. You've had the experience somewhere throughout your life experience so far, and most likely multiple times, where you have recognized to some degree, I don't approach things in the same way that the majority of people do. And I most likely have worked to try to hide that from others. And those go into what I refer to as HSE coping mechanisms. And you're probably having an inkling of that as you're listening, if you have had that kind of experience. That would be the first kind of, interesting. Sure. And then from there, I would say an assessment for sure. And, like I said, if you're a person who's not self-employed, then, the work of Dr. Elaine Aron will definitely be supportive for you. If you are self-employed or want to be self-employed, that's where my work picks up and continues and adds on to her work. And I've developed a quiz based on Dr. Aron's original assessment that will support you in knowing. Once you take the quiz, if you are, there's usually 3 categories that you fall into once you've taken the HSE quiz, and that's where you're somewhat of an HSE, or you're a super HSE, or if you're like me, you're a super uber HSE.
That's a whole different classification.
Yeah, and then once you've taken the quiz, you'll receive a free success guide, depending on where you fall, that will give you some first steps to start to work with this aspect of your nature, and it will change everything, because you can stop trying to pretend you're someone that you're not and learn how to just work with the way that you're coded so that it really works for you.
I was talking to. So I'll preface this by saying it seems like a lot of work, in the sense of, oh my word, I'm this, and I've got to now know this and understand that. But then I was thinking, as you said that last statement, last night I was talking to a friend, and he is really, really high level math and physics, and he cannot even relate to the marketing creative side of business. It's just not in his DNA. And I said, yeah, but here's the thing. And he was talking about his dad. I said, does your dad, like the math and physics? He's like, no, he's just turned off. I said, well, perfect example. You and he are totally different. And if you tried to make him do what you do, it would just be so polar opposite. And same with him. You're the physics math guy. If I tried to make you do a creative branding marketing campaign, you would be stuck like a deer in the headlights. So am I understanding correctly that being, assessed as, classified as highly sensitive entrepreneur, that is merely just going, hey, all those things that have been rumbling around in your brain, like I wonder if, and I wonder why this happens, now it's just clarity for you, and you're able to work in your strength. You might be frustrated in running your business or being an entrepreneur because you've been trying to do things the way that traditionally people have said, well, you got to do it this way, and you've tried it and tried it and tried it and it hasn't worked. Well, now all of a sudden, if you see this new way, it's like, that just fits and works, and it doesn't even feel like I'm working.
Totally. Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. I would say with probably one little caveat, but you definitely really nailed it, because, I like to say that HSEs who come to the Business Miracles mentoring programs tend to fall into one of 3 categories. Either they're category A, which is that they're just entering into the process of being self-employed. They either know that they're highly sensitive, or they've just discovered that they're highly sensitive, and they really want to start off on the right foot. Or category B, which is more of like what I hear you speaking to, which is someone who has tried everything, has taken a lot of courses, has worked with a lot of different coaches, and they just cannot get the business off the ground. And then they come to us, and suddenly, wow, things actually do start to move along. I mean, I have story after story after story, a person who could not, enroll a client to save their life. They step into the Business Miracles mentoring programs, and through the work, they have a full practice. They're happy. They're thriving as a person who's self-employed. Or category C, which is someone who has created some really significant success as a person who's self-employed, But then they find out they're highly sensitive and they're suddenly like, whoa, I could be doing this in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And where it doesn't take so much from me to get the results that I've gotten. So again, absolutely, you nailed it. The one caveat that I would say is that the first phase of entering into accepting, and even beyond accepting, which is embracing that you're highly sensitive, does require quote unquote work. I like to call it doing the real work, because you do have to dive into being willing to shift your perception, to really be willing to see yourself differently, because so many HSEs have unconsciously developed programming over the years of there's something wrong with me. The thought pattern typically goes with, I have felt different most of my life, and because I'm different, that means I'm wrong. And because I'm different, I can't do things the way that other people do, so I don't get the results that other people do, so there's something wrong with me. And we have to really detangle that and go through a bit of an internal retraining. But once you're willing to really step into that process and not only see yourself differently, but then see approaching business differently, and that can feel really risky, and being self-employed is like a risk journey anyway, but suddenly you're like, wow, I'm going to go about marketing and I'm going to go about selling in a totally different way than all the people over there on the internet are doing it. You know, is this going to work? But again, once the willingness to fully step into it, then you get to the place of what it is that you described, which is, wow, everything is so much easier. Business is easier. My life is easier. I feel so much better about who I am and how I am in the world. And then there's a real lightness and lifting. So if you can be willing to go through the real work, you know, of those first couple of phases, then the other side is quite rewarding.
Yeah, it'll be, and it's kind of like with anything, you know, losing weight, gaining weight, you know, improving your business, whatever. You've got to have like the Stephen Covey begin with the end in mind concept in place, because that's the thing that Yes. Yep, for sure. Well, I think we've had a couple drop the mic moments, so that is awesome. And what I'd like to do is wrap up with asking, what is the best way that someone could go, you know what, don't really totally grasp everything, but a couple things really triggered my inclination to learn a little bit more. What is the best way that someone can reach out, connect with you, maybe take that quiz and assessment, and maybe learn a little bit more about the highly sensitive entrepreneur movement?
For sure. I would say definitely start by taking the quiz, which is really an assessment, right? Like, you're not going to be graded. So it's just that HSEquiz.com is an easier URL. So it is at HSEquiz.com. And there you'll find, you know, an assessment that will really support you in just learning and understanding more about this aspect of yourself. And like I said before, once you take the HSE quiz, you'll find out if you're somewhat super or super uber, and then you'll receive your free success guide, which will help give you the first steps to really beginning, you know, this journey of again, accepting and embracing this part of yourself. So HSEquiz.com is a great place to start.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and learning more about this, Heather. It's been really wonderful, and appreciate your time.
Likewise. I so appreciate this conversation, Mike. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.